Hello, everybody. My name is Lazarus Mkeshe, and today again we're back to interrogate another economic issue. This week, the Namibian Statistics Agency released the inflation figures, or what we call NCPI, and we have invited Eloise du Plessis. She's the head of research at PSG Namibia, to again take us through the July 2020 figures. Eloise, welcome.
Hi, Lazarus, and good day to all our viewers.
Eloise, just before we even go into all the percentages, just maybe help us understand what inflation is, why it's important, and why you need to keep a look on the inflation figure.
Yes, inflation is one of the most important economic figures because it literally impacts your every single day life. Because inflation is just a fancy word for how much did prices go up. So how much more expensive are the things that I need to buy to live my life on a daily basis. So when we say the inflation for the month is 2% or 2.1%, that means that you now need 102 Namibian dollars to buy the same things that you could buy for $100 last year this time.
Okay, so that's, I think we must all then keep a very, very close eye on these figures, just so we know that the value for money, even when we're negotiating, even when we say putting out a request for increment, although it's not likely during these times, we then consider such percentages because they literally influence whether we make more use of our money than we did in the previous year and so on. But I'm going to give over to you, Eloise, to just take us through, also maybe give us a little bit of background, history throughout the years on what really has happened throughout the inflation figures over the years. And also just then, again, take us through what really informed the previous month's inflation rate, which were the biggest contributors, which other factors were like in the deflation mode and all of this stuff. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you. If we look at inflation for this month, it came out at 2.08%. So 2%, 2.1%, and that is around 0.18% lower than last month. So for overall, for the entire basket, the inflation rate came down, but we are still paying 2% more than we did a year ago for all of the same stuff. And the most important factors in the inflation number is food, and housing and transport, and then a little bit of addition from our alcoholic beverages as well. So we're going to look at how each of these different subsectors influence the inflation rate. If we look at the inflation rate over time, this is quite interesting to see. This is a very long run graph, Lazarus. This one runs from January 2003 to the most recent number. So you can see that we have had periods of very high inflation. Around in 2003, we had inflation in excess of 13%.
That was very high.
And then very, very high, very high. And then this other graph that I've got on here is the interest rates. So you can see that when inflation is high, the interest rates are high. And we can chat about that at a later stage to talk about the repo rate, because then when the interest rates go up, you see inflation coming down, and then to a very low point, and then interest rates go up again, and the inflation, inflation might go up again as the repo rate goes down. So where we are now is in a very low inflationary time. We have seen much higher periods of inflation in history. The most important contributors to this number, the biggest factor in our inflation number is housing, electricity, and water. So that number actually came down by 1.5% on a year-on-year basis. And the most important reason for that is that rental inflation has been coming down. So the coronavirus crisis will likely increase unemployment, which will put a further strain on the housing market. So let's just think about this, Lazarus. When people cannot pay higher rent, and when everyone is unable to pay higher rent, landlords cannot raise prices.
Yeah, they can't. Yeah,
because people simply. That's the thing. So people cannot pay for it, and that is what we're seeing now. Now, this might sound like a great thing for people who are renting, but this is a sign of severe economic stress when rental prices come down, and you can see that the landlords cannot put up their prices. The other big factor that keeps our inflation rate low is transport. So transport costs are also down by 1.2% on a year-to-year basis. And that is because fuel prices are down 21% year on year. Now, people might say, Eloise, what are you talking about? Fuel prices were raised between 70 cents and a liter just in August. But we forget how much we were paying last year this time. So in July 2019, we were still paying more for fuel than we are paying now. And this is largely due to the decrease in oil prices. So we expect that it will remain lower. And besides the fact that we've got acute currency weakness, we still think that this number will remain low. And then you're saying, okay, Louise, my house costs me less and my transport's costing me less. What is making the inflation number be 2%? That things are more expensive.
Let me just stop you there as well. It's always something we hear people saying. They say, no, the NSA released the figures and they say inflation is low. But I mean, I'm still spending my budget hasn't gone anywhere lower. And I think help us explain. I think because I'm seeing positives here, so I'm thinking probably how the price of food and whatever I'm seeing on the screen now has increased. Take us through this one.
Yes, so it also depends on what your personal inflation rate is, Lazarus. This is a basket of the entire country. So that's now taking an average of everybody in the country. But you might still be living with your parents, and that means housing inflation does absolutely nothing to you, but they expect you to buy your own food. And then you're in trouble because food price inflation is actually at 6% at this stage. Fruit and vegetable prices increased at around 14%. So that's where the pressure has been coming from. So if your main expense in the month has been food, your inflation is much higher than 2%. If you're not paying for housing, if you're not paying a rental amount, and that's not part of your budget, then, and you mainly spend money on food, then you have a very different inflation number to the 2% number, because your food cost you 6% more this year than it did July last year. And our outlook on that is that the wheat production has actually been quite good in South Africa and globally. So we don't expect this number to spike out too much. So it should remain under control. And then the other thing that will be different for different people in the country is that there are different inflation numbers for the different zones in the country. So the NSA actually computes a number for the northern region. You can see this red region that I have on the graph here. And then one for Windhoek and one for the rest of the country. That's zone 3. Now, if you're in zone 3, you're good. Your inflation's only 1.5%. And if you're in the north, it's 2.1%. And the Windhoek guys are the ones suffering. Their inflation is up by 2.5%. So it's also good to keep an eye on where you're living, because that will also make a difference to your.
Looks like I must move to the south, Keetmans or something.
Yes, that is the thing. That's where you need to be.
So yeah, one more thing. Let's quickly talk about this whole relationship between the inflation rate and also the repo rate. Help me understand it.
Okay. Inflation is sometimes driven by demand factors. So that's what we were talking about, the rental inflation, right? If people have got more money, then they're willing to pay more for rent, but also for other things. So if that gets too hot, if inflation gets too high, the central bank says, hold up, we're going to put less money in your pocket so that you cannot keep driving up these prices. So we're going to put interest rates up. So if you bought a car on credit, for example, then that car will now cost you more if they put the repo rate up.
Yeah.
Or if you live in a house and you've got a mortgage, that house will also cost you more per month. So you've got less money to drive up the prices of all the things in the market. And that's then supposed to drive down inflation. In Namibia, it's sometimes more useful and sometimes less useful because our inflation is very supply side driven. So it's not really the people in Namibia who are driving the prices. The prices are dependent on the currency and on simply the prices coming from South Africa.
Yeah.
So we import a lot of inflation and don't, generate just on the rental inflation. I think that's maybe the only part of the inflation number that's really demand driven. But yes, so that's what the central bank will do for that. Now, our central bank needs to consider a lot of other things like the relationship with South Africa, our reserves, economic growth. So inflation is a part of their consideration when they make the repo rate decision, but I don't think it's the main one. There are many other factors that they need to consider.
So what are your expectations for the repo and the announcement on Wednesday?
You just invite us to be wrong. That's the only thing. But I will now peer into my crystal ball, and we're expecting another cut. So we expect the rate to go down to 3.75% for this year.
5 basis
points. Yeah, so 25 bips to go, and then we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see how wrong I was.
Hopefully you're not wrong. Okay, Eloise, I think that's it for now. Thank you for taking us through the whole inflation figures for the previous month, July. That was and yeah, again when whatever happens on Wednesday, we'll again call you back to help us unpack what happens.
That's great. You can tell me. You can then scold me if I was wrong.
Yeah, Eloise, thank you so much for taking out the time, and thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, and that was Eloise du Plessis, head of research at PSG Namibia, bringing us somewhat a breakdown of the inflation figures for July 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please do subscribe to the Namibia YouTube channel. Thank you. Cheers.